Well, the excitement of buying land. Buying land is so exciting. It really is. And it just gives you such a sense of pride knowing that you own your own land, no matter how big or small. I started this process years ago, and it was just such a fulfilling experience. Um, some rough patches. It was a little hard going into it, not knowing the things to look for. So I'm going to share my experience so that if you decide to take this path, you'll be equipped with a bit more knowledge and won't make some of the mistakes I made. So tips on buying land, things I wish I knew. First thing is that you have to walk the land. If it's like a wooded area, depending on the weather, if it's super cold, I'd feel safer walking land in the woods in the country during the cold weather because you don't have too much you don't have snakes to deal with. Now I heard that some of them do come out in the cold, but for the most part, depending on the weather, I'll feel safer. I put my boots on and I'll walk it just to kind of see the elevation, how the land feels, to see if it has any water in there, like a creek or something like that. Now, if it's like May, June, July, summer, I ain't walking on land. I'm not doing that. But I walk around it just to see the perimeter of the property. So a good thing to do is to walk it so you can see the boundaries, where it starts, where it ends. If it has any old mobile homes on the property, any old RVs. Sometimes people are selling land that belonged to grandma and great grandma, and they live in the city and they have no idea what's on the property and they just want to get rid of it. So it's good for you to try to walk it a little bit just to kind of see what's on it. Also, you want to know if the piece of land that you're trying to buy is the property is even or uneven. If it has like a ditch, if the land itself is uneven, you might have to deal with a lot to get it evened out where you can build on it. Drainage, a good reason to walk the land, especially during when it's raining. Like shortly after it rains or the day after it rains, it's good to walk it to see if any puddles accumulate, to see if the property holds water, to see if it's in a flood zone, and things like that, to see if the property has any drainage issues. Because if the vacant land that you're trying to buy has any drainage issue, that's going to cause you some problems later on. Number two, make sure you're not overpaying for the property, right? Sometimes, if you're from the area and you know how much land goes for in that area, like how much an acre goes for, you can decide whether that's a good deal or not. If they're selling you 3 acres for $50,000 and you know that 1 acre usually goes for $8,500 for $10,000, then you might be overpaying for it. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to do with the property. If you're going to build a residential house, if you're going to develop it and put townhouses on there. But definitely you can get like if the property has a listing agent, like if it has a sign, a for sale sign listed by a realtor, you can call that realtor next for a comparative market analysis, and they can tell you how much properties in that area has been selling for, how much an acre has been selling for, how much vacant land has been selling for in that area, and you can kind of gauge whether you want to pay that much for it or not. You can also get it appraised. Now, on vacant land, you don't always need to do that. If land has been selling a lot in that area, you know the area, you know how much properties have been advertised, you're familiar. You don't necessarily have to get an appraisal on vacant land if you don't want to. If you're buying it cash, you don't have to. But if you're buying it, if you're financing it through a bank is going to want an appraisal on the property. So if you're in the area, you know how much land sells for that area, then you can get a good idea. If you're buying it for cash, then you can get a good idea of how much the property is worth, and you may not need to get an appraisal. But if you're financing it, you're going to need to get an appraisal. Another thing is to get a survey. Now, I knew that part about buying land because you have to do it when you buy houses, and I've owned properties. I've rented out property. So I knew that when I started getting into real estate investing. that you must get a survey. And on buying land, you need to get a survey because sometimes the land has been vacant for so long that the next door neighbor, Bubba and Butch and them, have been living on there for so many years, and they put up a fence or they put up a shed, and little did you know that their property or their fence or their shed is crossing over to your property line. So a survey is going to cost you anything from $800 to $1,000 or more, depending on how many acres it is. I remember I have a 2.5 acre property, and I to get a survey on there, I paid like $550, and the guy was just being nice to me. Like he was like, I usually charge 800, but I'm going to charge you 550. He was just, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then years later, I bought another property, and they were trying to charge me $2,400 for a survey. I was like, what in the world? But definitely get a survey. Sometimes the owner already has a survey because they've had the property for a while, or they did a survey recently. Sometimes when they're getting ready to sell the property, they'll get a survey, and you may be able to use that and save some money. And if the seller is nice enough, they'll tell you, "Hey, I already have a survey done. You can have it," and that'll help you out a lot too. But if not, get a survey. I was buying a property years ago, and there was no survey on the property. And the realtor was like, yeah, just go ahead and close on it. He was just kind of rushing me, just saying, just go ahead and close on it. You don't need a survey because I was buying it cash. Something told me to just go ahead and get a survey because I knew enough about real estate at that point that if I buy the property and somebody's who lives near the property has something on there, a shed, or they have a fence and the fence is too far over, I'm going to have legal issues like having to take them to court and whatnot. So I just said, you know what, I'll just bite the bullet and pay the money and get the survey. Lo and behold, I got the survey, 2.5 acres, houses are all spread out. Nobody's close to each other. No one's on top of each other. The neighbors next door had their fence. Their fence was 10 feet into my property. 10 feet is a lot of land. You can do a lot with 10 feet. Their fence was 10 feet into my property. And when I got the survey and I told the realtor this, he was like, oh, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and close. And, he was just like on me about closing. And I was like, no, I want this fence removed before I close on the property, because if not, I'm the one that's going to have to take this guy to court. I'm the one that's going to have to be dealing with this. The seller who owns the property right now, they're the ones that need to deal with this guy. And this guy took like 6 weeks to move his fence over. He took forever. So needless to say, the closing was delayed, but I held on and I was like, yeah, I'm not buying this land with this guy's fence 10 feet into my property. So I was glad that I was able to do that. So definitely get a survey. If you're financing it, the bank is going to make you get one anyway. So is a property in a flood zone? Yeah, you got to know that. For those of you who like to buy properties in Texas, but what I mean by that is that there was a time, I used to live in South Florida, and there was this big hoopla, this big, buy properties in Texas, buy cheap real estate in Texas. You can buy 2 or 3 acres for $5,000, and we're like, you live in Florida, and there was a lot of noise about buying land in Texas, and some people bought land, and they bought land that was in unbuildable areas, unbuildable lots. So is it in a flood zone? Yeah, walk around it after a heavy rain, and see if the road floods. See if a part of the property holds water. Go on the county's website. They have a GIS map. You can go on the appraiser's website, look up the property, put in the property ID number, and then click on that map. There's usually like a link for a map, and it gives you an aerial view of the property, and it shows you where the wetlands are. Another thing you can do is that you can go on the FEMA website and see if there's any wetlands, or if the property is partially in a flood zone. Some people will be selling you 5 acres, and you're like, yes, 5 acres, but you can only use 1 acre because the rest of the acre is in wetlands and flood zone. Like I've seen people selling 5 acres for like $60,000, and you're thinking, well, an acre is 10,000, so I'm not going to complain about that. But then you can only use 1 acre. You can only use 2 acres. Like, why am I going to buy 5 acres for $60,000 and I can only build on half of it? I can only use less than half of it. So keep that in mind when you're looking. Is it in a flood zone? Does it hold water? It may not be in a flood zone, but does it have wet spots in it where the water takes longer to drain out? You're going to have a lot of mud. You might have like puddles for the next 2 or 3 days after a rain. And if you're going to build on that, you might have to fill in the property a little bit more. You might have to get a couple of truckloads of dirt, soil, whatever, before you can build on it. Another thing is you can also get an elevation certificate. So once you look up the property online and you can see that it's not in a flood zone, but it does have some wet spots, you can get an elevation certificate to see the elevation of the property and where would be a better spot for you to build on. So you have to know what you can build, right? So another thing that you can do, what number is this? Number 4, number 5? I lost track. I've been doing this for so long. Number 1, walk the property. Number 2, make sure you're not paying too much for it. Number 3, get a survey. Number 4, is it in a flood zone, right? We just talked about that. Number 5, what can you build on the property? Some properties will not accept a tiny house. Some counties, you can have 5, 10, 20 acres. They won't accept a tiny house because they have a certain restriction on the square footage of a house. Some places require at least 13 or 1400 square foot house. Some places you're not allowed to have a mobile home. So the deed restrictions, you must know what you can build. You have to go to the county and get the restrictive covenants, I think is what they call them. So you can find out whether you can have a mobile home, whether it is mandatory that you have a site-built house, what is the minimum square footage, because if the minimum square footage is at least 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, you're not going to be able to have a tiny house, right? What about RVs? Are you allowed to live in RVs? Some places will allow you to live in RV if it's remote enough, if it's country enough, country with a K. But some places, if it's like in the country but kind of close to the city, you're not allowed to live in an RV. You have to have a house on the land, and then you can have an RV. Or you can live in an RV on the land while you're building your house, but you're not allowed to just live on there on an RV. Are animals allowed? Are you allowed to have horses and pigs and chickens? How many chickens? There used to be a time where you could have as many chickens as you want on your land in the country. I just saw an article online where they're making changes in some states where you can only have X number of chickens per acre. So if you have 3 acres, you can only have 6 chickens per acre. And if they find out you have more chickens than that, then you can get in trouble. Like, what in the world? But yeah, it's happening. So find out the restrictions. What kind of property you can build, if you must have a site-built house, or if you can have a mobile home. Some places won't even allow you to have a single wide. It has to be a double wide. So we're going to pause it here. I'm going to make another video giving you more tips and things that you need to know to buy a house and protect yourself as well. On the next video, I'm going to talk about how you can protect yourself from legal issues of buying a land that's not properly searched, and getting a septic and a well and all those type of things, because I don't want to make the video too long. All right, so at the end here, I'm going to show you a clip of this property that I was looking at that I ended up buying, and the process of me getting it cleared and things like that. But it's really short. So hang on tight, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Ciao. Woohoo! Yeah, it's cold. Man, I don't know I was going to walk. I was going to wear my boots, but I'm like, oh, he's going to bring something that we can ride on.
Yeah, I know. I see it. I was like, damn. But yeah, we got stuff right there.
Oh, yeah, I can. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So, you don't have to have. We're trying to make the little road thing for you. The road with the people right there. You go up like that. You got to put some dirt all up through here. Maybe should just go.
Yeah, that rain. Oh, this part looks really nice.
Yeah, it's like a road. Right here, trying to about to cut a tree out right there. A couple things, but we're trying to just make it so when we bring the dirt, we just go all the way up. Ain't my hands cold.